Welcome everybody to the second to last colloquium of this year, the first year of colloquiums, and a very special colloquium honoring the lives of Ron Mosier and Michael Skaff. I'm going to make a little proposal here. Since when we started this colloquium at the beginning of the year, I really didn't know how it would go, and it's sort of built up over the year, and I think this is going to be an ongoing thing. Our last talk was given by Scott Anderson, and it was the Pi Day lecture, which I'm hoping will be an annual tradition, an accessible talk that's open to a general audience and amusing and fun and just really cool. I would like this also to become an annual talk. I propose that this is the first annual Skaff-Mosier lecture, and we'll make it a lecture about mathematics and computer science as it happens in industry. Both Dr. Mosier and Dr. Skaff worked a lot in industry. Dr. Mosier almost exclusively in industry. And I think I will leave the details of that to better speakers. But this is the first annual Skaff-Mosier lecture. The topic of it will be, appropriately enough, Dr. Skaff and Mosier. And I would like a warm applause for our speakers for the day, John Dwyer and Abhijit Dasgupta.
Who here wants to be like Mike? Okay. I first met Mike Skaff back in, would you believe, April of 1969. How many of you remember 1969? Some of you do, some of you don't. Okay. It's a while ago. He was finishing his first year at the university, and I was on my interview trip at the time. And all through our careers together, I sort of felt I'd been walking in his footsteps. He's 1 year older than I was. He had one additional year of tenure at the university that I did. And he was 1 year more experienced than I was all along the line. In particular, there were some things about Mike that I remember. We worked together, this was after we'd been on campus 5 or 6 years together, with the City of Detroit Tax Assessor's Office. It seems the City of Detroit tax assessor felt that some of the big three were cheating on their corporate taxes. Specifically, there were problems with how much write-off should they get for machines that were still in good shape but no longer usable because they were obsolete. And the auto companies were writing them off at one level. The tax assessor thought they should be written off at a somewhat different level, more advantageous to the city. As a result of that, we met some problems and objections from all parties and managed to get together a display which we thought laid the data out pretty well. And actually, Mike Skaff wrote it, but there was an article published in a journal called the Tax Assessor's Journal. Have you ever heard of that? No, and most people haven't. But the Tax Assessor's Journal is now a respected journal. At that time, it was just starting up. It's respected now because they awarded Mike Skaff a prize for writing the best paper for that journal that particular year. Another thing I remember working with Mike on, he and Bob Kane, some of you remember Professor Kane, worked on a computer contest for high school students. It went on for 10 years, every year a new contest for 10 years. And one of the interesting things, not only did we work together making up problems and so on, but that Mike and I sat in the computer room to grade the outputs as they came through. Other people were working on different aspects of the computer. And between times when we were busy grading papers, we exchanged a lot of ideas. And those ideas range from everything from philosophy of teaching to baseball. Yeah, Mike Skaff was a baseball fan of the first order. And every spring, this was his time of year because that's when spring training started and the baseball season was imminent. And unfortunately, he kind of left me behind because after the baseball strikes, a couple of them along the way, I kind of lost my interest in baseball. But at first, that was what one of our major topics of conversation was about. Another thing that happened a little bit later is he was, like me, a night person. And he would watch the TV late at night while he was preparing stuff. And at that time, I think it was Channel 50, was running reruns of Star Trek. And he got focused on it. And so he'd come in and we'd talk endlessly about what the various issues in Star Trek were all about. As you know, I happen to be a definite fan of the show, and I think it's one of the few TV series that we've seen in recent times which really deals substantively with social issues. And that's interesting because Mike and I were at possibly opposite ends of the political spectrum in many ways. But there were various things about the show that got us together, at least in sharing opinions. So these are some of the interesting things that go on. One last comment, and that is that I would like, as a symbolic gift from Mike Skaff to all of you, I don't know whether Mike would approve, but I think he would or I wouldn't do it. I would like to give a specific gift to Lazarus here. That's a gift, which is the poem you may have heard of, Casey at the Bat.
Oh, Casey at the Bat.
Casey at the Bat is a poem I'm sure Mike Skaff would have liked. The reason I gave it to Lazarus, symbolically of giving it to you all, is that Lazarus at one time confided to me that he didn't know anything about and didn't care anything about baseball. Mike can't do anything about it now, but I can in his name.
As everyone knows, Professor Skaff was a teacher of mine when I was a student here, and after he supported all my ambitions to become a professor, and so he wrote me letters of recommendation for graduate school. And when I went away to graduate school and I was finishing up my Ph.D., Michael Skaff helped me come back here as a faculty member, for which I was very grateful. And then as a faculty member here, he was always supportive of my efforts. He talked to me a lot about teaching, about philosophy of teaching, and he supported my application for tenure. And now I'm a fixture here. I have my associate professor on tenure, and I'm very grateful to Michael Skaff for that support. He brought me into his research group along with Abhijit and John Olesic, and we worked on a problem together, and it was a lot of fun. Being outside functional analysis and in general, being a graph theorist, my perspective was a little bit different in the research group, but it was definitely fun for me. We came up with something, and it's still ongoing, but it's very interesting, and I think Abhijit will be talking more about that. One of the things that really struck me about Michael Skaff was his personality and his style as a professor, which was something that I've always wanted to follow and practice. And so I strive to be at that level, because I think Michael Skaff was probably one of the best that we ever had on our faculty here at UVM. So I strive for that excellence. I strive for that, not just for that academic excellence, but for that excellence in the classroom as a teacher and as a human being. And I'm forever grateful to him. And what also struck me about him as a professor was that he taught his students not just facts about mathematics, about theorems, about how to solve problems, but he gave them a philosophy, a way of thinking about solving problems, but being able to take the information that's given to you and to come up with your best guess. And I think that this was supported by his years in industry, at the aerospace industry, because I remember one Pi Nu Epsilon talk he gave. He talked about his time with the space program, and there was one mission in which they were getting all this data, and the computer had to invert this matrix, and the matrix, it turned out to be uninvertible. So it was no inverse. So they were stuck, and they needed to figure that out. So they had to guess, and they used their knowledge. They used their knowledge of mathematics and their backgrounds to come up with their best guess, and they did it, and they solved the problem. So I was profoundly affected by that. I thought that was an amazing story, and I saw that this was the type of thinking that he was trying to give to his students, and I think that's very important. I think that's the type of problem solving that is necessary for the future and for our students to be able to possess. So these are my thoughts, and I thank everyone for coming here today, especially the Skaff family. I miss him every day. When I go for my walks in the neighborhood, I always see him running around. When I was a kid, I remember him running in my neighborhood. And when I go for my walks today, I still see him running. So it's. But thank you.
Thanks everyone over here, and a lot of the things that John and Lazarus said are true for me too, modified way. When I first came here in 2004, I didn't know him, but when I met him, we had a little chat, and he asked me about my background, and some of you probably know this story. That he asked me, where did you do your Ph.D.? And I said, from University of California. And he said, well, so did I. And then he said, well, what did you do after that? I said, I worked in the industry for a while. And he said, so did I. And it turned out, to keep it short, that our career paths were very, very similar. And except that I was, like you were 1 year behind, I was 30 years behind. So it's like, just the exact gap of 30 years. And one of the first things that happened here after coming here is the nonlinear analysis seminar run by Dr. Skaff. He led the seminar, and Lazarus mentioned about it. I was there. John Oleksic was there. I think Jeff was there for a while. And that gave me a tremendous boost. We started working out problems from Griffel's book, making it a valve that would solve all the problems, and he was behind it. And so we learned quite a bit. What I want to talk about today, though, is his work. And this is actually his paper from the year 1969, and it's on vector valued Orley spaces, generalized n functions, and we won't go into all the detail, but it's very, very technical, and this is just part one. There's part two, but they, he generalized roughly. He generalized many ideas which we use in math, like the idea of mean, the idea of directional derivative, and so on. In these papers, they are applied to much more general spaces, and applied to other things as well. Now, the nonlinear analysis seminar that we ran, Mike Skaff, he had some ideas, and we did some little research, and I think towards the end Brandon joined us too, and we presented it in a conference, and Central Michigan University. I think I was there, Lazarus went there, Mrs. Skaff, I remember, was there, and I'll give a brief sketch of what were there. This is kind of the ideas being used, and one of my goals is to see if there are people in the math department, and faculty, students, anyone who might be interested in taking this up, pursuing, because there's more stuff to be done. So there is the idea of linear regression. You have some independent variables, and then you can combine these independent variables into terms, z terms we say. For example, z1 may be, say, xy squared, well, x1, I wrote x1, x2 squared, plus, I don't know, a log of x3, something like that. Each z term is a function of some of the variables. And so there's a large number of z terms, and then you form a linear combination of those z terms. And the main problem of regression is given data points and given a particular set of z terms to find the betas, to find the betas which would be the best fit, the least squares approximation to the data points. One of the problems that he wanted to worry about is, normally when you do regression, the number of z terms is quite limited. And what he was wondering about is, what if we take general z terms, like all elementary functions. How about that? That's a very large class. Can we do anything there? So that's the problem. Suppose the n is much larger than n, given a collection of data sampling equation 1, how can we recover the equation itself? And now here, not just the betas have to be found, the z's have to be found too. That's where it differs from regression. You know, you don't know what the z's are. There's unlimited supply of z's, and it initially seems like an impossible problem to tackle. And normally there is something called stepwise regression, where you try some z terms, some of them look good, you keep them, the others you throw away, and you keep doing that, and that kind of works if the number of z terms are not too big. And that's kind of an exhaustive procedure. Look at all possible z terms, go one by blocks, and find which ones are there in your equation. Now, here is something that John mentioned too. One of his original motivation was the job of appraisal, right? You have a house and you kind of find what is its value. Can we write a software to do that? Software appraiser, that is. And for that, you have to determine the selling price of the house depending on certain factors. Some of them might be a little subjective, but can we find a good software? And again, the problem was the number of z terms seemed like too high, and we didn't know what functions to look for. Another application is in machine learning. Again, I won't go into the technical details. There is something called perceptron in neural network theory, where you have a little machine learning from data. I mean, you train the machine by giving data points, saying, well, this is right, this is wrong. You keep saying that. After a while, the machine knows, oh, this is what we are talking about. Maybe that's like a boundary, to cross or not, like in our autonomous vehicles that we do. Do we go past that boundary or not? Again, if you want to do it generally, there is a similar problem of handling the number of z terms, and this was the main problem that everybody got stuck in. And there's a lot of work in literature saying that this is what's going to have an effect of doom for this whole problem, and you can never handle it. So if the number of z terms is very large, you have all elementary functions, then you can keep searching and never find your equation. Never just keep searching. And that's known as the curse of dimensionality. And, so because if there are just too many dimensions to handle, you run out of time for search. Now, Skaff had an idea about how to do it, and that's basically instead of an exhaustive search, like in stepwise regression, what you do is you do a probabilistic algorithm where instead of trying to exhaust them, try things, I'll simplify, try things kind of at random. Pick one and see if it's good. If it's good, keep it, change the weights a little bit, and try it again, bring in some more. It's bad, maybe throw it away, but not throw it away totally. Flip a coin, and based on that, flip few coins, and based on that, you have a distribution by which you find a probability of whether we want to keep it or throw it away. And this is something which he did in 1973, and he thought that this was something we need to check in more detail, and because it seemed like things were going to work. And this is the rough algorithm that he used in 1973. He would try some z terms and give some weights. So these were new variables that we used for probability distributions. And then pick a set of independent variables, choose z terms, perform stepwise. Then the weights will be changed on each run, and the weights will for each variable will tell you whether you are going to accept it or reject that term. And keep going on, repeat that process, kind of randomly picking terms from the Z space and trying them out and throwing randomly things out. It looks like a wild idea, but surprisingly, when Yang Ming, who was before Random, wrote the program, it seemed to work very, very well for a limited number of cases. He wrote a Java program. We hired him as an RA, and initial results were good. Theoretical framework behind it, we studied quite a bit of theoretical work. What can be done? Skaff was very interested in the work of Billman, of Holland, and there was a theorem that in the long run, randomization can overcome the curse. Although it's a theoretical theorem, but that gave everyone hope that we might be able to go ahead. This was the heuristic control interface that there was in the program to change and try different controls and see how you get your regression working. Now, this is what I want to say right now. This is the main point. There are some ideas of him that we haven't tried out yet. No program has been written. We don't know whether it's, how hard would it be to actually implement them. One is, instead of trying these Z terms kind of in a uniform fashion, find a metric where you could say that this Z term is close to this Z term. Might be the log function and the sine function should be treated very far, and maybe the polynomials should be closer. Things like that. We don't know what metric, and there are many, many possibilities. And this is one idea we talked about. Well, maybe just as a simple start, we can start on a bounded set and use the normal sup norm as a metric and see how that. What does that mean? That means when we choose a term and find a term good, a Z term good, the next term in our next trial, the next Z term we are going to choose is not going to be a random one, but the probability distribution of choice would be a Gaussian or something based on our success. So far away you go in the metric, lower the chance. And that's what I mean by Gaussian decay via the metric. Another very interesting approach that he talked about is, in video compression. They use a technique where, if you think of video, if you think of a picture, even before video, if you think of a two-dimensional picture, that's a two-dimensional picture, and if you want to write it in memory, if you want to encode it in memory, it's a one-dimensional object. So you want to have a two-dimensional thing encoded by a one-dimensional thing. So you want to have a coding function which is known as a space-filling curve. So from one dimension, it will cover everything in 2 dimensions, roughly. And they use it in image processing, and you probably know quite a bit about it, where they use Hilbert curves to actually a single curve which will cover the entire plane. In video, they do it more. So in video, you have frames after frames coming in time, so you can think of that as 3D, like, 2-dimensional pictures, time being the 3rd dimension. So you have a 3-dimensional space to encode. And interestingly, what has been found is using these space-filling curves, now going from R1 to R3, from R1 to R3, back and forth in time, even though your representation in the computer might not be, linear with time, monotonic with time, it gives you a much better compression of the video data, and it's used in video codecs all the time. How about we try that for the Z terms? That is, we have a large number of dimensions, and in this large number of dimensions, what if we encode that by a single one-dimensional R1 to encode, say, R to the n, where it is very large, and try that approach. Again, this is something we talked about. We did some literature search, but nothing has been implemented. And maybe we can combine these 2 ideas and try to implement that. And that's one other thing that can be done. Finally, I think one of the things that would be great is to actually have the theoretical part right. That is, find conditions and prove a theorem saying under these conditions this can be done in this way. And that's the ideal goal, that okay, if your function satisfies this criteria, this and this criteria, then it's going to work, and the algorithm is going to converge within a certain number of steps, and a theorem like that could be formulated. So it's a big research project that we are talking about here. And but I know some of you already talked to me and saying that, well, this should be done and we should be pursuing that, and maybe as our research, one of these colloquiums or as a special seminar, we can take it up and pursue his ideas. That's all I wanted to say, and well, again, I thank everyone for coming in here. Yes.
I wasn't able to be here when you went.
You are next. Let me say one more quick thing, and then I want to thank the Skaff family. Mrs. Skaff is here, Michael and David and Mary, they're here, and we want to thank them for everything, as well as for establishing a special scholarship for our good students, and we also have the first recipients here today, and so it's a nice occasion there. So I want to again thank you.
I'd like to explain further in greater depth the Skaff algorithm. I'd also like to be able to fly. I can't do either because I'm not a mathematician, and Mike's math is something beyond my realm of understanding. But I did know Mike well. We shared some background. We both worked at Hughes Aircraft for a time. I think he was coming this way when I was going that way in 1969 or thereabouts. But when I came back here to study for my master's and then my doctorate, Mike became an advisor to me, and I got tremendous guidance in terms of the mathematics, but also in terms of just the pursuit of a doctoral dissertation. He helped me with my design of experiments for my simulation modeling. He helped me with confidence, understanding what confidence and validity meant, and how to apply various methods of assessing the level of confidence and validity of the models. And even more so, he was a caring mentor. And I think if I were to characterize Mike in a simple phrase, I think certainly there's the mathematics, but the caring mentor that he became for so many students and for so many junior faculty members. Listening to Abhijit talk about the math that he got involved in, I think there's probably a whole list of our faculty members that gained from that caring mentorship as they became faculty and became scholars in mathematics and effective teachers. So he lives on through those faculty. We're trying to find a replacement for him. We've got four people coming in this week and next. One actually went to UCLA, so interesting that he's coming from a Ph.D. at UCLA, but we don't know whether he'll be the selected candidate. But we're not going to replace Mike with some freshly minted Ph.D., but someone will follow in his footsteps, and I think. And that's what we look for when we're doing these interviews. We look for someone who has the evidence that they can and will be a caring mentor, they will be an effective teacher, they will be a scholar in mathematics. And I'm excited about the first two people having certainly a lot of the indicators that they can and will become those things. And we'll talk to a couple more people, and hopefully we'll have the beginnings of someone that might become as great an asset to the university, but more importantly, a model for our students as Mike was, and a model for the next generation of faculty after them. You know, and that's the way the academy works. We have as academic children here, and in some ways I was his academic child, but I was more importantly, I think, someone who gained enormous lessons about life from my conversations with Mike, and a lot of understanding of the academy and how the best faculty are caring mentors. So, thank you, and thanks for coming, especially for the Skaff family.
If you don't know, I was a student here going back about as far as people can remember. I started here in summer of 1969. And I was 16 years old.
I can remember further back.
I know. When did you come here?
66.
Okay, that's right. I apologize. And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. What did you say, Kate?
I was just born then in '66.
I didn't know that. I'll keep that in mind.
And I'm not participating in this discussion.
But I, of course, didn't quite know what I wanted to study. I was only like 16 years old at the time. But my father was here on the engineering faculty. Well, he was actually dean of engineering. And he said, why don't you go into engineering and I'll be your advisor and I'll help you pick out courses. Now back then, and I don't think you have it now, that you can do the Bachelor of Engineering and take 30 credits of anything related. I don't know if you can do that now, but he said, you don't have to be mechanical electrical, just be a general engineer. And if you want to take physics or you want to take math, okay. See, I kind of knew I was cut out to be an engineer. But I really thought I was going to be a physicist, because I like physical science, I like math, I thought this was great. The physics professors who aren't here now were not that inspirational. And I took math courses and I liked it. I took Bob Kane and I took Ray Travis, which were good, nice courses. And then I took the real analysis course. And that was, at that point, probably my favorite course in the first 2 or 3 years. And of course, for those of you who don't know, Mike Skaff back then taught the real analysis. He taught the first semester in real analysis 2. The course was structured differently. For the mathematicians here, we did metric spaces. And I remember talking about metric space and quotient sequences. And this was, I felt at the time this was my best course, and this is exactly what I want to study. And it was largely because of Mike Skaff that I decided to go into mathematics. And at that point on, I said, once I got my engineering degree, I'm going to go to graduate school in math. So those of you, I don't think any students here actually had me in a math class. Some had me in class, you know, so that didn't come. But any of you had me in math class, you now know who to blame for what you're in front of.
I want to thank the family, Mike Skaff's family. Many things have been said for Dr. Skaff, so I'm not going to repeat that. He's a great human being. He's a great mentor. And since I've been here, and he helped me a lot in terms of being a professor, how to do research. And actually, I wasn't a little bit in part of that research too. I knew a little bit background of that, but somehow I didn't continue for that. The probability regression approach. Also, I was introduced to have Mike Skaff's project a little bit, and I really appreciate that, and to have an opportunity to do that. In this department, the 2 people inspire me a lot. One would be Mike Skaff, the other one would be Bob Kane, and both of them live in my heart forever. And one thing they taught me something about what this means by eternity. Means they inspire others so much, and they live in everybody's heart forever. That's how I remember them. And that's what I want to say. Okay.
So Mike, are a little bit different. In Mike Skaff's heaven, UCLA makes the Final Four every year. He and I almost never talked about math. It just didn't come up. I don't know. We just talked about life or sports a lot. And that's just, I guess I had a different kind of relationship, maybe because I came along too late. I'd like to read a statement from his dear friend Kevin Dimey, who couldn't make it here today. It is a pleasure and an honor to write something in tribute of my dear friend Mike Skaff. I undoubtedly wanted to be here in person. Unfortunately, we have our last meeting of the University Tenure and Promotion Committee before meeting with the AVP. Mike Skaff was more than my best friend. I considered him as my older brother. Although he physically left, he is with us in spirit and will continue to be with us. It is very hard to forget him. We used to have this ritual. During our breaks, we would meet on the second floor and walk laps. I guess you could say this was our form of daily exercise. Now, whenever I go to the second floor, I look at the corner where his office was with a strange feeling. It feels as if he is going to wave to me, or that he's going to be there to say, "Kevin, wait up, let's go for a walk." After a few seconds, I realize that only his memories will be walking with me. Mike and I shared the same political views on many issues. We would discuss current events, politics, war, and many issues surrounding the Middle East, since we both had a Christian Middle Eastern background. We would talk about the past experiences we had growing up and our families. We became very close. No matter what I went through, I knew that I had a wonderful friend who unconditionally supported me. Over the years, our families became very close. My daughters consider him as an uncle.
It's odd now, you reading this, and it wasn't a minute ago.
There are two of us. As everybody knows, Mike Skaff was an amazing and dedicated professor. He loved his profession. He never hesitated to teach new computer science courses, many of which were advanced. He used to spend the whole summer preparing for a class. Whenever I had a new class and I had nobody to teach it, he used to say, "Do not worry, I will teach it." We had many great memories. I laugh whenever I think about us arguing at department meetings over who gets to sit where. I would always say, "I'm sitting here, this is my seat." And he would always smile and move to the other chair, and it was next to mine. I also remember how he always took care of me. In fact, one of the best things he did for me was calming me down whenever I was ready to lose my temper. I will never forget that. He used to say, "It is not worth it. Look what happened to me. Do you want to end up like me?" After that, he used to take me outside or to the second floor, depending on the weather, for a walk to cool me down. This used to be followed by some political discussion to further cool me down. I do not know if he did this deliberately, bringing up our favorite topic, politics, or not. All I know is that I did not lose my temper and then regret it. To close up, Mike was a wonderful person. He had the greatest personality. I miss him very much. I will never forget about all his help, our discussions, his support, and most importantly, our friendship. He left us, but the memories he gave to us and the impact he had on our lives will remain with us forever.
Like Lazarus, I was a student of Mike's. He was also my advisor. So when I did my undergraduate program in math here, I went to Mike for advice. I did take his modern analysis class too, kicked my butt, but I loved it. I liked Mike. It was, the class that really, I'm sure I didn't kick your butt, but like Mike, it was the class that kind of opened your eyes to what mathematics really could be and was, took you to the next level, and I loved it. And Mike was great, as everyone has said, as far as mentoring. He was there for me as a student and as a chairperson as well. He was coming to my office. I'd see him at least twice a week. He would come by. I would look forward to his visit, and we would talk about what was going on and how his classes were going. When we needed somebody to take over the math classes that the business school students took, I'm still so impressed by how he embraced that. Those are tough classes to teach. He did a great job of involving the business school and finding out what is it that you want this class to be, and then he went after it. Those students really struggled with the math, and he took that challenge on, and every term he would reanalyze how the class went, what kind of things we could do better, what kind of data could we collect to make things better. He really took it on as a mathematical problem, and I think the classes have really benefited from his influence on those, and that was really tough, and I admire him for taking that on, and his willingness to take it on. And that was something when I was chair that was something very valuable, and as Kevin had mentioned, how his willingness to take on new courses and new challenges. You might expect that someone that's been teaching for a long time would be, this is where I've earned where I am now, and this is what I'm going to be doing. And he never had that attitude. He was always willing to take on a new challenge, and he did it with a smiling face and a good attitude. And I miss him dearly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to come down. If if everybody has spoken, but I just want to thank every one of you who are here today and for all the wonderful words that you've spoken. We have to agree with you, but it means so very much to us, and we so appreciate the support of all of you while Michael was in the hospital and afterward. We're so excited about the scholarships, and I'm delighted that both of the recipients are here today. So on behalf of all of our family, for those of you who don't know our family, this is our son David, son number 2, our son Michael, son number 1, and Mary, who's our daughter-in-law, who's Michael's wife. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
It was supposed to be about not only Mike Skaff, but Ron Mosier. I'll say a couple of words, but I think we're going to save most of this for maybe another session sometime, perhaps next year. But I met Ron back in the middle 1970s through his wife. Before you get the wrong impression, his wife, at that time, his first wife, Marilyn, was a lawyer, and she was working with Focus Hope on a race and sex discrimination case, and I was an expert witness, and we met in order to get our case prepared. But I went to her house for some work, and there was Ron running around the kitchen, hanging up strings on wooden dowels in the kitchen. Those strings were spaghetti that he'd made and was hanging up to dry before he cooked it. The most interesting lecture I ever heard Ron give was in one of the math department colloquia, when he was talking about something called nanograms. And in trying to prepare for this, I tried to check out what nanograms are on the net and through other research. Couldn't find any reference to it. But it turns out that if you're an engineer or a statistician or any kind of an applied mathematician, these were devices which gave you quick and dirty estimates of awkward problems. You wanted to find the area of some irregular shape. These were devices which helped you find out a way to approximate that area. And I was very impressed with that because I'd used some nanograms as a statistician from time to time, but never knew what they were. I think that Ron Mosier was one of the most complete mathematicians I know, and I'm not sure that he was as much of an expert in his area like Mike was, but he had a range of interest in mathematics which impressed me. He could talk about almost any mathematical topic at all, knowledgeably and creatively. With that in mind, I think that we're now in a position to kind of assess what these two did. Mike and Ron are no longer with us physically, but we are now what we are in part because of who they were. What they contributed to our discipline, to our institution, and to ourselves. Their contributions will be here among us for a long time to come, as our contributions in turn will affect those who follow us.
I won't stand up either, but we talked about Mike quite a lot, Ron a little bit, and I think one of the things that always impressed me about the university, and I've been to other places and not seen this, is that a university is a form of a corporation, but unlike most corporations, U of D Mercy seems to have a soul. And I'm not being hokey here. Those of you that know me know that I don't have hokey in me. But I'm thinking about not just Mike and Ron, Bob Kane certainly, he came up a few times today. For those of you that go a little bit further back, Mary Jo Nichols and Jim Lanahan here in mathematics, Larry in engineering, Art McGovern, George Pickering. It's the people around here that everybody seems to know, even if they don't go out of their way to be known. Jerry Kavanaugh is another one that pops right to mind, that really make this place what it is. And it's more than just a place to come and learn how to be a mechanical engineer or a computer scientist or whatever. You come here and you learn about life and how to make the world better and how to be creative and how to find things in you that you didn't know you have. And I'll talk Mike more than Ron because I knew him better. That was what Mike and people like Mike were all about, was helping you find what was in you that you didn't necessarily know you have. And the one specific thing I wanted to say about Mike is that, and Katie knew me at the time, Mike was one of the people who believed in me back when there wasn't very much to believe in. And I always appreciated him for that. Now eat food.
Next year, same place, same time?
I'm thinking maybe we'll move the Skaff board election to fall because my days will be in the spring.
Yes.